Good morning, Judith.
Good morning, Sonya.
Welcome to the Coach's Cup podcast. I am Sonya Green from Sonya Green Coaching.
And I am Judith Fender. I am the coach for the No BS weight loss program.
Today, we have referenced anxiety since this podcast started. We have talked about it openly, but it has never been the topic of conversation, the focus of a podcast. And today, anxiety is center stage.
Fun fact, anxiety has been center stage. We just haven't talked about it.
Yeah, exactly. So we're shining the light on it.
Yes, at least as far as Coach Judith is concerned, it has been a lead character in her life.
Yeah. So let's start by talking a little bit about that. It's something that has felt crippling to you at times.
I believe crippling or paralyzing.
Yeah.
Like, especially when it comes to speaking, which through my research, I've been learning that the part of your brain that's affected when you are having it's survival stress response, right? The anxiety, it triggers where you don't speak. It hits a nerve. It's a physiological response. Not only is it psychological, emotional, but you physically are drawn to not speaking. And it could be related to childhood experiences where I maybe experiences things and I didn't speak for whatever reason, people pleasing, growing up in circumstances. Won't get into my past.
Well, it's interesting because as you say that, I will go into my past a little bit, but when I am in conflict, my brain often just like empties anything. It just empties. I have no response and I can't speak. And as you were saying that, I immediately had a flashback to something I've talked about before with my first grade teacher who would berate me for various things. And because I was always so taken aback by what she was berating me for.
Right, her messaging.
Her messaging.
What the hell, lady?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. And so I think that's where I developed that response from. So even today, if somebody comes to me and demands that I give, I don't know, that I account for my actions in some way.
Yeah.
It's just like my brain, everything empties out.
This is full disclosure. I debated if I was going to mention this to you. I'm getting ready to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I was going to be like, Sonya, you cannot ask me pointed questions anymore on podcasting because my brain, it dumps, the blood leaves and I have no access.
Yeah.
It happens. It's not you, it's me and how but I'm learning the nuances of how quickly I can shut down. And the reason it's a problem, as we were talking, it is the ability, y'all. I could live with anxiety vibrating in my body all day long, but what I can't live with especially as I'm trying to work and learn and study and speak publicly is have that shutdown.
Yeah.
Where I can't access my prefrontal cortex.
Yeah. No, that's good. And, when I ask you pointed questions, it's always because I think you have the answer. But
I do, but you can't ask me.
I know. No, that is great. There you go, folks. This is what happens in live podcasting.
Yes.
But no, I will work on that because that's fair. I had not even thought about that moment, but
I don't know but it occurred to me the last couple podcasts ago, not today. But I was harboring it and I thought, well, I just need to tell her what's going on. And I'm like, no, then all the bullshit, all the stories like, no, Judith, you're not to figure it out. No, this is not a problem. No, just study and just be ready and just be ready to be ready.
Yeah.
And because I was telling a story, it's because she's a teacher and she just gave me that tone. And my brain went to like, I don't have the answer.
So here is the response that you are allowed to give me at any time.
Yeah.
You can always say, I'm not sure what you're looking for there, Sonya.
I could just say, oh, excuse me a minute. I'm in my trauma response. The blood has left my brain. I'm going to need about 2 minutes to access my thinking now.
Yes. And through the power of editing, all that goes away. But that's what I love about this, and why I will definitely not edit this part out, is because if it happens to the two of us, most likely it happens to you too, dear listener.
Yeah.
Because we all have those responses that we can access.
Yeah. 100%. I don't remember having anxiety as a kid. And even as, everything, and I have been through, and I have been through the things with anxiety, especially as an adult. But when I hear people say anxiety, the terminology I'm personally referring to is myself, because I do believe there is like this generalized anxiety, like a really functional, where you're not hijacked, where you are just kind of just humming along, like Brooke was talking about in her podcast, kind of just humming along, because she's, like you said, to her point, she's challenging herself. Like we can expect that as we are, challenging our careers, challenging how we show up, podcasting, just when we have challenges, that our brain's going to want to always try to keep us safe. That everything new is going to present with itself, right? The brain's going to try to create a comfort in our body and safety in our body.
Yeah.
So I just lost my point where I'm going with this.
Well, you were talking about how we, so you were talking about the difference in Brooke's anxiety humming along, and we're talking about Brooke Castillo. For those of you who don't know, she recently did a podcast on the Life Coach School podcast about anxiety ahead of time, that got us thinking more about doing a specific podcast. And her anxiety is that generalized anxiety that you're talking about, that hums constantly. And I think it's important to differentiate between that and the trauma response, the anxiety that's produced from trauma. Not that we can't work on both of them, because the whole point of your story is talking about how you're working through. People don't know that yet, but that's how you have worked through that response. But that there's a difference in that generalized level, that constant hum.
Like normal. Like,
yes. Anytime we take on new goals or big changes,
it's normal. Anxiety is normal and expected.
Yes.
So my experience and how I'm kind of figuring this out for myself and is understanding that because it wasn't making sense to me. It was interfering with with my brain and my life that I wanted to create. So I'm not where to explain, just things have happened to me in my life where I developed, like you're talking about your first grade story. And my things that more specifically were, around my parents and around the divorce that they had, and more also along how I was conditioned to emotionally support a parent.
Yes.
Right, who had a child at 15 and who had a nervous system all her own with its own set of circumstances. And so as a child, my dad was always working, and he had his own story too. He grew up in a family of alcoholics. And so his nervous system. So for me to create a sense of safety for myself as a child, I behaved in ways like the people pleasing, making sure that everyone was okay, thinking I could control things, thinking if I showed up and made sure, mom had anniversary cards, or that, that the rug was flipped just so, right? This is a true fact. If we had those rugs that had fringe on them, and I was convinced if the rug was flipped just the right way, that mom would be happy. I even grew up saying, like, I will know I have done a good job growing up if I don't make my mom cry. It's kind of how I parented myself. Just don't make mom cry. You'll be doing all right. Just don't make mom cry.
Yeah.
And
it worked for you as a child. It's important to say that you developed that because that was your survival mechanism as a child. It worked for you.
She was my primary caregiver.
Yeah.
And I needed her online. And she was, when she had me, she had not only had a child at 15, then when I was born, this child was like 13 and was running away. And so that in and of itself, like, my mom was not emotionally available. And I understand, like, there is nothing I'm saying in this story. Am I faulting my parents or saying that I was loved and cared for? I was not mistreated or anything like that. I was a well-loved child. And this is a little side story too. I don't know if I've ever told you this. In third grade, I wanted to go to public school. I'd gone to private school, my whole 2 years of my life, right? I've gone to, but I wanted to go to private school, and the private school I was in had like 7 kids. The public school had like 35. I don't know, a bunch. And the teacher had a conference with my mom, and she's like, Judith is not taking care of herself. She's going around taking care of everyone else.
Yeah.
And I would do that, like go around, like the kids were crying. They didn't know their spelling words and they couldn't figure out their multiplication tables. And one of them had a finger in this sling thing. And he was a behavior problem. Like, but I was determined, like, he had his own issues. But the point being, my mom she took me out of public school and put me back in private school because I was tending to the needs of everyone else. And when I even think about, like, I've just grown up knowing this about myself my whole life, but now as a coach, and I'm unpeeling this story and trying to figure out who I am and my nervous system and how I became, what happened to me, get to be 50 years old and being literally in paralysis when I want to speak to Corinne Crabtree.
Your employer.
My boss, right? Someone who I literally had spent a week with at a beach retreat, I spent one-on-one time with, and, and she's been nothing but amazing to me. And it's not for lack, very social, very friendly, and me too. But, so all this to say, our nervous system, my nervous system, and then things, and my tendency was not to speak, growing up in the household where you don't come to me, don't come to me crying.
Yeah.
So no feelings.
Yeah.
Good, no anger feelings, no feelings at all. Right. That's how I modulated myself.
Just even.
Right. Just be, I was going to be the rock. And, it's funny. My mom even said that to me at some point about 20 years ago, that she said, it's not that I look to you like you're my mother. You're just so strong. That's a quote. And I think when I think about her, I love when I think about that, because that's who I was to her, because she didn't have the ability to rock herself, to ground herself in her wisdom, she was in her story. So anyway, there's Judy's past, there's Judy's experiences, there's Sonya's experiences. Mine just kept manifesting. I went go into business, have children, normal life circumstances, all the while never managing my people-pleasing tendencies, managing expressing myself and what I wanted. And this is super common in many of my coaching clients. And I start recognizing these things. They're like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I want. I'm like, I get it. Yeah, because you've catered to others so long. Like, I truly believe I do. Helping others is my story. But okay. So as this comes to anxiety and as it relates to coaching, and who better than you to podcast with someone who I went through life coach school with, someone who saw me show up. I never missed a training with Bev.
You did not.
All righty. So if you know that sentence. That what I went through, and like the post, witnessing me overcoming, like paralyzing. Do you remember when, I can't remember her name, the attractive brown-haired lady? I was coaching someone and like literally, and I said right now, no, she coaches on women empowerment, and she has the pretty room with the French doors behind her, works at the life coach school. Anyway, she was our substitute coach one day, and I was coaching someone, and I'm convinced that Bev had to put somebody else in just try to help me certify because I was so blinded. I was so blinded with anxiety, but I'm coaching whoever it was. I think it might've been Kelly. And I literally just froze up.
Yeah.
I just asked a couple questions, and it was probably about 90 seconds in, and I was locked up. And she was saying, come on, Judith, you can do it. You can do it. And I could not speak. I could not make words come out of my mouth. And then I will say there was probably like at that point, like there was the shaming of myself, the getting myself in a feedback loop of, what's wrong with me? I'm broken, and not understanding that I was having, it was trauma response.
Yeah. Well, and that is our response to anxiety many times is, come on, you can do it. And what that does is just makes it, it's like me asking you a pointed question.
Yes, because I can hear anyway.
So, I mean, that's just a good nugget for if you know that someone is anxiety prone, that encouraging them in the moment is probably the wrong thing to do.
I don't know what the right thing would have been to do if I think about that, because one, I didn't have understanding. Even I had these, because these were just like isolated things, because clearly I'm functioning in the real world. I'm not frozen at the grocery store with or talking to humans anywhere else in my world. But
and as soon as class was over, we would often get on a call together, and it was gone at that point because the performance was over.
Right. And I'm very aware of the story I told myself, but where like good anxiety gone bad, that's what it is. Just like paralyzed, not being able to speak. So
fast forward to
part of my no BS story. Y'all have heard nuggets. There's the podcast where we have Corinne come on and we talk about anxiety and how to connect this back to, I have been working on my nervous system. I have been working, this past year has been a lot of emotions and trying to parcel out what is what. And it was in March at Mastermind where I saw Corinne, right? Because, she is like, to me, like that is I will talk to her. I will speak to her. I want to talk to her. I have things to say, but every time I see her, I can't speak. And then I get in my story and then I shame myself. And then all she sees is me crying. Like, what's wrong with you? No. Like, that's my coach.
She cries a lot.
She's not, I don't think she's seen me cry since I've been working for her. But anyway, these were all pre days. So when I saw her at Mastermind, I was like, Corinne, I just wanted to just like talk to you. And so I scheduled an appointment just to talk with her, because I didn't want to talk like on the fly at a camp or on the fly or getting her off guard story. I told myself like I wanted to be very intentional and have the opportunity to ground myself. And I told her during the meeting, like, Corinne, I didn't use these exact words exactly, but I said, I wanted to test out my big girl nervous system. I've been working on myself. I've been working on the story and being with myself in the moment and not get hijacked and have a conversation where I can access my executive functioning. And so I had a 30-minute conversation with her. And the reason you were asking me earlier, it was confidence. I needed the confidence to speak to her because it was very representative of, my story with anxiety. Because there's not anybody else that I'm carrying, that I get that excited about or built this much drama about for no reason at all. Except, she's amazing.
So what are the steps? I'm asking you a pointed question, sorry, but it occurred to me, what were the steps that you took? And let's make it clear, this has been
years.
Yeah. this is not something that you did twice and
Nope.
suddenly you were
Nope.
prepared. This
Nope.
is work. This has been in many ways your life's work over the last 3 years.
Very much. So when I was hired, it started showing up like we have team meetings, and I would show up and couldn't speak at a team meeting. I don't think anybody knew that in the beginning, but like I was kind of like taken aback because I was not expecting it either. I was not expecting, like, I've got this thing I wanted. I'm working for no BS, and here I show up, and the words.
And it was making you feel like you weren't producing what you needed to.
Yes, and then it fed the story of not good enough, and you're never going to figure this out, and ruminating and drama, but again, but I could coach my ass off. Here's what I knew. Like, I could coach, but you get me in a meeting or get me and ask coaches. This is when I really, really was starting to have some awareness last year. There was when my mom passed away, then it brought its own set of circumstances and stories I would tell myself, because I told myself I was behind. So-and-so's ahead of me, and I'm not doing, all just more stories. And I literally spent, I think it was some crazy amount of time and asked coaches and answered like one question.
Yeah.
It was my first day back after my mom had passed away. And I was paralyzed with judging myself because my nervous system was dysregulated, for lack of a better word. And I couldn't access, I was judging myself the whole time. I didn't know it then, but it took me a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, to start recognizing that I was beating myself up when I was in there.
Yeah.
You can't help these people, I'm like, oh, wait, what? And then I started working on I have something to offer here.
I want to interrupt just a minute because I really want to highlight that. It took you a couple of months probably before you heard yourself, what you were doing to yourself.
Yep.
And I want to stop there because I want listeners to understand. We sometimes say it off the cuff so many times, you need to hear your thoughts. You need to hear your thoughts, as if it's something you just do. And it's not something you just do. It takes time to hear you. There's no telling how many times we hear a story run through our head before we understand.
Because I was believing it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm behind. It's a fact. It's not a story.
And you don't even realize that you're arguing for it. So if you are trying to catch those thoughts and you don't do it the first or second time it happens, you're not behind.
You're not behind.
This is normal, folks.
Yeah.
Hear me say it. It's normal. You're not going to catch it the first time and fix it and move on. That's not how this works. No. All right. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make that point.
I get fascinated with it too. And it's super helpful when I'm coaching clients to like sharing this story. Yes. Like, I'm a coach and I'm managing my mind and I figured this out. Like,
coaching is a very different task than answering to someone.
Yeah.
And, you were feeling the anxiety of.
But even, the awareness that, well, one, that I was so judgmental when I was in that, I don't ask coaches, or you can ask coaches questions and we type responses. And it would be a problem that I would be, air quote, so slow, why can't I answer more? Well, because I'm hijacked, because what I know, when you're carrying this low level anxiety anyway, layer in some extra emotion, some frustration with technology, and I'm offline. I am literally blind pecking my thoughts, right? Yeah. It's not helpful to be in the emotion. All this to say, managing your mind, what I have learned this past year is, it is a process. It is just like it is everything we coach on, and it is about slowing down. And I think I mentioned this in one podcast about, we did one, it was at grit or perseverance. And I always considered myself a real gritty kind of persevere. Like but I get what I want. I set a goal and I go for it. Yeah. And while that is a very admirable quality, it is also, I think, to the detriment when you're trying to solve for, I'm pointing my finger, when you're trying to solve for emotions, it's not helpful when you're trying to solve for thought work, that it absolutely 150,000% requires you to slow down, pause, put a pin in it, whatever that vocabulary is you use, and being aware. Like it was a perfect storm of sorts.
Yeah.
So had the conversation, and this is actually where I was going to say, so it was a Q&A about a week later after the meeting I had with Corinne, and I was the coach on call. And that means like I'm in the little chat box answering questions in the Q&A, and Corinne can see everything I type. That's another fun fact, because you're like, when Corinne calls a coach up, she gets to see what's typed. And then there's this whole story about like, what question do I say for her to answer? Do I answer this one? Am I doing this right? All the normal thoughts. But I managed my mind to the nanosecond for 60 minutes so that I could be aware. I was present with my heartbeat. I was breathing. I did get up and walk around my room one time and come back so that I could stay. One is just like a personal quest to stay online. When I say online, that means access to my executive function, and not like, because when there's nothing worse when your brain gets hijacked and someone asks you a question, even if it's typed, and Corinne's there, because then the time feels like it's going so slow. Like, oh my God, I'm even slower. So anxiety, it is an emotion. If you are having responses, anything like I'm explaining, where you are experiencing avoidant behaviors to prevent things from happening or not getting the goals you want, it is required upon you to solve this. And I'm going to be a big advocate for it here too. Like doctors who prescribe medication, and they will tell you it's everywhere you see the commercials. It is a tool. It is not a solution.
Yes.
And I absolutely understand now 100% that verbiage, seeing it as medication as a tool. If you need that tool, if you want that tool, it's available. I'm not pro either one way or the other, but it is not a solve for anxiety. All right. You got some questions for me? Like, what did I say?
Well, so there's somebody out there who's listening to us who is having the same paralyzing experience, maybe with their boss, maybe with their spouse, their partner, teacher, their parents,
professor.
Yeah.
You see that with kids. I did it one time with a professor, the truth be told.
Yeah. I would often have to, I don't know about often, but every so often I would encounter a student and it would occur to me, oh, this is someone dealing with anxiety, or sometimes this is someone dealing with a trauma that I don't know about. And knowing, like having that moment of realization in my own mind, which only happened after I started doing this work, unfortunately, near the end of my career. Right. I mean, there was a part of me, a nurturing part of me that could kick in and nurture, like you were talking about, but not until I really understood and started doing thought work could I switch gears and really start the process of trying to help that person make their own realizations. Yeah. And sometimes speak their words back to them to say, this is what I heard you say. Is this what you mean? And just really opening their own, I saw that help so much and wished I'd had that tool for longer. But if that person is out there today, what is a takeaway that you want them to leave knowing, or that you want to kind of start that process, other than that medication is just a tool, which I love, because we do think many times I take a pill, I get rid of the problem.
Yep.
And that's not life in most situations.
Again, differentiating between, just having the vibration of anxiety and then having the trauma response where it absolutely makes no sense, the shutdown of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
I think my big takeaway is, again, the steps to solution: start journaling. Here's something that I learned last year too, when I was in anxiety and grief and overwhelm, and what other fun feelings was I having last year? Well, you remembered me saying at a podcast about, ziplining and when I jumping out of a plane, that I felt like ziplining, my feelings matched insides.
Yes.
And that was probably some real beginning of awareness, just having that sentence too, because exercise had been taken away from me. One of my coping strategies was exercise, and I had that period. Is, if you feel like you're sitting, there were many times I was in meetings with coaches and peers where, like, I knew Coach MJ was saying words to me, and I literally felt like I was underwater.
Yeah, like you couldn't process anything they were saying.
Hear words, and it was just like so overwhelming. It was like being underwater, and I could see her lips moving, and all I could do, oh my God, all I could just do was cry.
Yeah.
I couldn't get words out, and I knew that, like, I had a story. I got a story.
Yeah.
All this to say, y'all got a great job. I got a great boss. I have great bosses. I don't want anything. They are not scary people. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. And I'm not that scared of a person. Yeah. But for me, it is the heartbeat. When my heart skips a beat, like you've heard me talk about caffeine and why I'm always working on caffeine, because I just need less of it in my body. Mm-hmm. And I make a weak ass cup of coffee for myself. For this very matter, because I can just feel a heartbeat and my brain starts telling the stories. I'm clicking. I'm like, where's the danger? Where's the, oh yeah. And I can start telling stories. So when you are in the kind of vibration, in the kind of response I was in, I also had the awareness that thought work didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It wasn't helpful. What was helpful was getting into my body, mm-hmm. and learning how to process emotion. Yeah. And that is still the work I'm doing. I find it's the meditating every day. It's the getting out into nature. It's getting the sleep. It is making sure that I eat foods that aren't inflammatory. It is taking care of myself in the best ways possible, yes. Including managing my mind every moment. That is one of the gifts of being a coach all day long, is I get to be first class witness now to my brain and all the thoughts, mm-hmm. all the processes. Done a lot of talking here.
Well, but I think it's so important for people to hear, because again, and I've heard you say some variation of this, when you are in the midst of that, it feels like you're so alone. You're the only person that's ever felt this way. You're just,
oh, I was convinced I was broken. Like,
yes.
I was like, thank goodness. I mean, I had you coaching me, I had MJ coaching me, and Kathy, and I had my own private and Coach Jenny. Like, I mean, anybody who would, and holding that space, mm-hmm. asking me pointed questions, coming back to, I had to go through all of that. And it was January, once the holidays were over, when I really started questioning that safety component. And I can, it's so funny because I can remember thinking, like, safety, of course you're safe. I mean, you're safe. You're in your house, of course. But when you're dealing with the body, and like I coach my clients, it is like 95% of what you're feeling, it's in your body. It's taken over. In your brain, your conscious thinking is that 5% part. And then you have the ability to be the witness for yourself and witness what's going on in your body and hold that space. Like, this is my mammalian response. This is, my body is having a response from something else, recognizing it from that observer point of view and allowing myself to create safety with my cognitive brain, to create, going outside, taking a couple laps around my little driveway thing right here to get back online. And I do that now.
Touching yourself. You mentioned that, putting your hand on your heart, but just physical touch with yourself, rubbing your hand on your arm, putting your hand on your chest.
Right. And I will tell you too, that the kind of anxiety that I was having, and this is super important, as the more as I'm studying about this, there's some breath work is not good for anxiety.
Yeah.
And I had the kind, it hurt my teeth. And I was like, every coach would be like, take a breath. And I'm like, I can't, again, it hurts, it hurts to breathe. And now it all makes sense. That was just where my energy was lit up on my throat chakra.
Right. Right. So to pull this to a close.
Yes.
If you are out there and you are dealing there with anxiety, first, it's important to know that there are two types. There's the type that pushes us, that hums in our body anytime we do something that's new or different or uncomfortable. And then there is a trauma response type of anxiety. And they're two very different things. And coaches are more than happy to help you with either. So I would say simply, if you are looking for coaching with this maybe this is a good first step to start to realize what are some of the thoughts because we can see your thoughts and question them, right? When you are convinced that they are truths. They are not thoughts, they are true. And we can begin that process of questioning. So if you're looking for coaching, I would just say that you can find me at sonyagreencoaching.com or on Instagram at Sonya, SONYA_green coaching.
And if you can find me at the No BS Weight Loss Program or just Judy, JUSTJUDIE on, that's it. Did I get it all out? I did.
You did. And we are on Facebook, the Coach's Cup podcast. So go there. We would love to hear your own thoughts. Yeah. I mean, because we know that everybody has a certain level of anxiety. That's the way we're created. So go on there and let's talk about some of these and normalize it so that we're not running from it.
Yeah. You can't run from this kind, like
no.
Or the other,
And I appreciate so much your willingness to share so much of this journey because it's an ongoing journey, right? It's not something that you have now conquered and it's never going to be there again.
It's just like working out. It never gets easier. I just get better at it.
Right. All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.